Ethiopia is said to have achieved a significant economic milestone by officially commencing the export of goods under the Africa Continental Free Trade Area framework. The first shipment, consisting of meat, fruits, and other agricultural products, was dispatched to Somalia, Kenya, and South Africa through both land and air routes. January 1st, 2021 marked the start of trading under AfCFTA, providing a single market that presents a combined GDP of $3.4 trillion. And with liberalized tariffs, intra-regional trade potential has increased by over $18.65 billion. 54 AU member states have signed the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, with 42 ratified, demonstrating a strong commitment to market integration. To let us in on the prospects and risks for Africa trade, we have Professor Iraki, economist and professor at the University of Nairobi. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, and how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. A pleasure to have you in. Let's kickstart. Obviously, Ethiopia making the headlines. How do they stand to benefit, or what do they stand to benefit from tapping into this? And what concrete advantages does Ethiopia expect to gain from this move, especially for local producers and exporters?
I think if you go to any African country, we say charity starts at home. So before we go to the global market, we go to export to the European Union, to China, to US, to Australia, we should start by thinking about our own market. So what Ethiopia has done is very symbolic, but we have not seen somebody actualizing it. So I think other countries should follow suit. We start trading more among ourselves. We make more money in Africa so that we depend less on aid, and we reach the standards of living of every African on the African continent. We may talk about FDI, we may talk about foreign aid, but at the end of the day, it's about Africans for Africa themselves. And what Ethiopia has done should be emulated by other countries.
Yes, indeed, emulated by other countries. We look forward to seeing other countries tap into it. We also have on this conversation Jerry Fanos Musikwi, economist from Zimbabwe. Jerry Fanos, are you there? Okay, hopefully we'll come to him shortly. I'm coming back to you, Prof, and looking at what's happening in Ethiopia, how would you say that they plan to scale up its export capacity under the AfCFTA framework?
I think the easiest way to scale up is to make sure that we have infrastructure that enables trade. It is two stories. One, we have something to export, we have something to trade, and how you trade it. Because in Africa, we often forget the supply chains. To get meat or fruits or minerals from one country to another, you need infrastructure, you need airlines, you need roads, you need railways. So you need ports. So I think despite starting what Ethiopia has done, we need to improve the infrastructure that enhances trade. And that's what every country should be doing. And number two, it's not just about removing the tariff. There are a lot of non-tariff barriers that we have in trade. For example, people come up with health conditions, people come up with standard regulations, people come up with other non-tariff barriers that hinder trade. So it should be not just about removing the financial part of tariff, but all non-tariff barriers. And if we accept that Africa can benefit by trading among itself, by being in infrastructure, there's no way we are not going to benefit as other countries have done, from China to Korea to Japan, by trading with the rest of the world. We start from Africa, we go to the rest of the world, and I can assure you that in the next 10, 20 years, we are going to see the benefits through more trade, through more jobs, and through higher standard of living.
I mean, a lot of optimism expressed there, and I think we're going to, look at the broader picture, some of the drawbacks with the implementation and adoption, and exploring the full potential of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement and area shortly after this break. Stay with us. Ethiopia has achieved a significant economic milestone and tapped into the potentials of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. We have Professor Iraqi joining us from Nairobi. He has shared some optimism about what's happening across the continent with intra-Africa trade. But we're going to bring in now Geraphanos. He joins us from Zimbabwe. Geraphanos, good morning.
Good afternoon from this side. It's already in the afternoon. Thank you very much, Joanna.
Yes.
And Professor, I really appreciate how is Nairobi and Nigeria as well.
Yes. All right. So the reason I brought you in is because I remember listening to you at a conference highlight or somewhat express some level of pessimism or reality check with what is happening with intra-Africa trade. Prof has set some sort of foundation and has expressed quite some optimism about what's happening. But just your thoughts with what is happening with intra-Africa trade and the Africa Continental Free Trade Area in Africa and how countries are tapping into it.
Okay, thank you very much. Looking at the recent trade agreements or the exports that were made by Ethiopia, it's really something which is a continental milestone. That is, we are shifting from rhetoric to real trade, to real business, not something like we are just going every year we go to the conferences, we are going to African Free Continental Trade, African Continental Free Trade Area, policies are being crafted, the frameworks are being crafted each and every time. But when it comes to real trade, we see that we are still standing at around 17% to 18% in terms of intra-Africa trade, while if we look at EU and other blocks, they have just small markets, but they trade around 60% of their goods. That is what we want to see or to experience in Africa. So this milestone that has been begun by Ethiopia is really something that we are happy to see as a great milestone for Africa in terms of achieving the AU agenda of 2063, the Africa that we want.
And I'm coming back to you, Professor Iraqi. Looking at the data, some may say it does sound underwhelming when you compare it to what is happening across other continents. They're doing 60%, Asia, Europe, when it comes to intra-trade within that continent. But in Africa, we're still hovering around 15, below 20%. What are your thoughts on the pace of progress when it comes to intra-Africa trade, especially a year like this and going forward where we're seeing that major shake-up in the global trade system?
I think I'm not very happy with the speed with free trade or trade among African countries has been progressive. 60 years after African countries got their independence, we would be having more trade than that. 15% is not good enough. If you look at the population of Africa, 1.2 billion. If you look at the number of countries, if you look at the number of products, if you look at the number of commodities, if you look at the number of services, we should be doing better than that. One of the biggest fears I have is that after launching the Africa Free Trade Area, some countries will go back and start having bilateral negotiations with the European Union, with US, with China, and so on. There's also the big risk that we are going to be trading the same commodities. So if African Free Trade Area has to advance and benefit African countries, then we must ensure that there is diversity of products, the value addition, and very important that we speak in one voice. Otherwise, once we start doing bilateral or negotiation with other continents, other countries, then we are going to undermine African Free Trade Area. But I think it's a start, but there's a need to accelerate and the measure is success. I think in Africa we talk too much instead of acting.
So we need to harmonize and have that one voice, one intention, not be on different pages. And I'm coming back to you, Geraphanos. What would you say is the major drawback? What do you think is slowing us down? Prof has highlighted, some fronting intra-Africa trade, but then by the side having bilateral talks with the likes of China. What else have you identified as some of the issues around, tapping into the AfCFTA?
Okay, thank you very much, Joanna. What I think is the African Continental Free Trade Area. It's something that each and every nation desires. But this issue of colonial era and stuff, whereby we are still bragging that we are looking east, we are looking west and stuff, instead of looking at ourselves. Because if you check the African Free Continental Trade Area, that's the biggest block that we have with 55 countries and such a GDP of around 3.4 trillion that we will be expecting in terms of trade. Even the population, it's huge. So what I think is there is need for willingness to change. That's the first thing. Because now we cannot have 10 visas in Africa. When you want to go to this nation, you want to go to Senegal, you need a visa. You want to go to Egypt, you need a visa. While it's in AU, they use a single visa. They just use their national identification cards and they just go. There is a free movement of labor, free movement of goods and services. So in Africa, I think what is only needed is the willingness in terms of in terms of leadership. In terms of the policymakers, we need the willingness. Like now, if you look, Southern Africa, it trades around 2 billion in terms of petroleum. It's in terms of oil. I mean, it's around 2 billion. While least we can trade even with Angola. There is oil in Angola, but we go and trade with Dubai. We go and trade with the UAE. Why can't we do that in Africa? But the previous issues in terms of bilateral agreements, the previous colonial friendships and stuff. But if we can shift from that, looking east, looking west, and we look into Africa, you will see that we can have a sustainable development in Africa. Not like what we are seeing in terms of FDI, foreign aid and stuff, which has proved that there is nothing that they can improve in terms of the economies of Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm coming back to you, Prof, and sticking with some of the challenges and some of the barriers to trade. We know that this AfCFTA, the agreement, involves reduction of tariffs, and then there are some countries that may be concerned that they may lose out on revenues. We also know it, involves perhaps looser border, but with the security challenges, some of them are tightening their borders, and that's impacting trade. How do you think these issues can be dealt with directly by, let's look at the government institutions, let's also look at the private sector. How can they come together to, attract some of the realities on the ground that are hindering the acceleration of intra-Africa trade?
I think we need to start thinking more positively, because if we have one free market, we are going to attract more investors. So that when I'm coming to invest in Africa, I don't see one country, I don't see one region, I see the whole continent. So by opening we attract more investors, we attract more trade, we attract more partners. I know definitely those borders will be executed, but we make sure there's more peace among countries. It's more trade. Trade area is an advantage in very many ways. Open the borders, there will be more trade, there will be more jobs, and there will be no reason why there will be insecurity. So one of the causes of insecurity in Africa is because of joblessness, because of stagnant concerns. In the long run, we are going to benefit more. Just look at the European Union. Look at the early days of East African community, how the region prospered. So I think there are fears among political leaders, they may lose some power. There are fears among maybe some traders or some governments because they may lose money from tariff. But the money you are going to get from expanded trade, money you are going to get from expanded investment from both locally and from foreign investors will be much, much more than the money you get from tariffs. So let's think long run. Let's not think short run. Let's not think just about the borders. Let's think about the whole continent. And once Africa is successful, it will be able to reach the rest of the world. And that's the dream of the current generation. That's the dream of our children. And we must help them realize it now.
So it takes some level of patriotism and looking beyond the initial profits. Coming back to you, Jeff, and even as we tie things together, I'd like you to touch briefly on the infrastructure that is needed, in place, whether it's road networks or whatever else, and, the government involvement as well as the private sector involvement in building those infrastructures that will aid trade within Africa.
Okay, thank you very much, Joanna. If we look, I think in Africa we have an infrastructure gap, number one. Number two, we have non-tariff barriers as a concern. In terms of infrastructure, only 28% of African roads, they are paved. So logistics and customs challenges in terms of delays, it's still a concern. If you check, so 28% of the roads are paved. So what does that mean? It means in terms of road infrastructure, in terms of logistics, we still need to touch up on those ones. So the private sector, they can come in and tap in those special routes that are needed in terms of trade. Let's say in Zimbabwe, you need maybe to move goods from the sea through Zimbabwe, through Zambia, Malawi, and to Central Africa. But if you check, there is a missing.
All right, it does appear that Jeff-Ness Network has tripped briefly, but Professor Iraqi, I'll give you the closing word here. Of course, today the story is on Ethiopia's participation. To tie things together, how will this move from Ethiopia continue to influence neighboring countries in the Horn of Africa, and could Ethiopia also emerge as a regional leader in shaping continental trade?
I think Ethiopia has always been a continental leader. Because one of the things that we find very easy to do in Ethiopia is to travel there. Out of Africans don't need visa to go to Ethiopia. But I think if African free trade really has to expand and work as expected, the most important infrastructure we need to change is our mental setup. We must believe that we can be manufacturers, we can be traders, that we can trade among ourselves, we can export to the rest of the world. If we change that mental setup, we start seeing possibilities. We realize that we can be as good as other countries, as good as other continents. There's no way Africa cannot take part in global trade, internal trade, and improve the welfare of its people. And that should happen soonest and in our lifetime. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Extern Iraqi, economist, University of Nairobi. And of course, earlier we had Jeff-Ness Musikwi, economist from Zimbabwe. Thank you for your time, gentlemen.